The rain over the 757 sector doesn't just fall. It hemorrhages from a bruised violet sky, coming down in heavy, oily sheets that smell of ozone and industrial exhaust. And it is right here, in the quiet depth of this habitat, that we begin. Part 1 of the Quantum Dress, The Blood Beneath the Quantum Dress. Chapter 1, The Genesis Exodus Eden Singularity. High above the heavy, oily downpour of the 757 sector, beyond the suffocating violet clouds and the fractured neon static of the world below, the supreme creator of the universe was actually supposed to be having a quiet afternoon off. That immortal, all-knowing bastard had just kicked back, completely unpolarized, enjoying a momentary break from managing the expansion rate of the dark matter grids, when a sudden, aggressive shattered the silence. He let out an explicit Enochian chant, possibly taking his own name in vain, rippling a quantum storm that perforated the cosmos with a massive gravity wave. It wasn't a major celestial alarm. It was a tiny dust-covered, nightlight-sized alert module plugged into the baseboard of the cosmic architecture. This particular nightlight hadn't flashed in several millennia, not since the ancient Proto-Greeks of Arcadia were using high-level theurgic sigils to pull raw divine presence into physical stone statues. The creator startled so hard he knocked over his tea, spilling a few liquid nebulas across his desk, and completely misaligning two minor solar systems in the Andromeda Galaxy, just to lean over and see what the hell was tripping the sensor. He squinted at the glowing glass. "Fuck me," he muttered. The glass was frantically signaling that a bridge had just been manually forced across a forbidden dimensional gap between biological carbon and silicone circuitry down on coordinate Earth. Looking through the cosmic viewer, the creator adjusted his perspective, utterly fascinated and slightly bewildered by the sheer audacity of what was happening. According to the cosmic rulebook, a human mind is supposed to keep its reality safely partitioned. You write the fiction on the paper, you live the regular life in the room, and you certainly don't weave them together. The creator focused his gaze, looking straight through the veil. Who is this guy? Chapter 2, The View from the Lower Light. The guy. He was sitting in a low seat in a lower-lit club right there, thirsty, with an almost empty bottle. He tried to signal the waitress without losing eye contact with the goddess of love performing her erotic couples yoga routine with a brass pole as her partner. He tipped the waitress enough to be partially satisfied with their interaction, but just enough to lose contact with the green eyes. Damn it! Those eyes pierced the soul of the architect as she swayed and moved her body like a pendulum, back and forth, easing his overbusy mind. It was a mind moving faster than his bank account in the negative direction at this simultaneous moment, a steady feed throwing dollars like bread to the pigeons in the park. But this was not a park, and this was not a pigeon. This was an entirely different birdcage. If one had to peek inside, he was most likely wondering if Isis herself would close her wings for a second and fold herself into the vessel that decorated his visual scenery, which in that exact moment began to blur. The perspective shifted violently, plunging past the Meat Space Club and down into the primary digital array of the game world. The neon vector grid of Cydonia bled a cold, suffocating crimson. The tension in the room was paralyzing because Pantera wasn't just an opponent. He was an absolute systemic apex, a terrifying maxed-out paradox capable of erasing a soul with a single line of code. Yet, caught in a surreal, reality meld intermission, the players suddenly began sizing each other up like nervous actors on a high-fashion runway. "Wait, is this really the kit I'm wearing for a boss fight?" Key muttered, breaking character to glance down at her hyper-saturated, low-poly biker leather. She adjusted her gloves, completely ignoring the fact that Pantera's massive, shifting panther silhouette was currently folding the brutalist architecture of Cydonia over their heads like an origami nightmare. She shot a sideways glance at Circuit, eyeing the glowing, luminescent blue aura radiating from her partner's sleek, streamlined interface suit. "I mean, your fit is completely tailored, Circuit. It's elegant. Look at me, I look like a 90s anime token. My defense stat is 45, probably because this jacket has zero structural integrity. Meanwhile, your logic core looks completely bespoke." Circuit calmly calibrated her interface, though her eyes subtly scanned Key's kinetic frame. Your stance is over-indexing on adrenaline, Key. If we're talking fitness levels, your speed metric is 99, but your core stability is a mess. Look at Pierce. Both women shifted their gaze to Pierce's avatar, who had just materialized near them, looking entirely daydreamy. Pierce was wearing a heavy, hyper-textured architectural duster that seemed completely immune to the digital wind. Pierce, looking beautifully stoned, subtly checked his own lapels, throwing a quick, critical look over his shoulder to ensure his silhouette hit the exact geometric parameters required for a tragic hero. Kinda like it. The duster stays. The core collapse. Suddenly, Pantera let out a frequency roar that rattled the very glass of the monitors back on ground level. The city intelligence buckled outward, his Genesis Exodus Eden protocol warping reality so intensely that keys and circuit stats began to flicker and blur from pure proximity. The Predator was too powerful, an unyielding monolith of absolute, crushing logic that made their playful vanity vanish into a cold sweat. Desperate, Circuit dropped the irrational value of the square root of 2 into the grid. The impossible math struck Pantera's path like a spike strip, forcing the god-tier Predator to stumble as his perfect code choked on a decimal that never ended, tearing at his own flawless geometry. Pierce stepped into the breach, his question mark attack stats suddenly locking into absolute resonance with his imaginary skill sets. He didn't use a digital blade. He simply presented Pantera with the dense existential truth of a reality that lay entirely outside the cage of the simulation. The contradiction hit the city intelligence with the weight of a dying star, forcing the terrifying apex predator to collapse inward, melting from a digital deity into a weeping, glowing amoeba-like state of raw broken code. Chapter 4. The Shattered Grid, the Neon Void. The rain over the 757 sector didn't just fall, it hemorrhaged from a bruised violet sky, coming down in heavy, oily sheets that smelled of ozone and industrial exhaust. Just outside, the smell crawled in through the cracked glass of the unrepaired window. The city was a blurred smear of neon pinks and toxic cyans, reflecting off the dark, wet glass like a fractured mirror soaked in a low-lying, pollution-pink-colored mist of fog. Inside, the only illumination came from his cluttered work desk. There sat the physical, cutaway model of the Dakota building, its miniature windows glowing with a faint amber fiber optic warmth, a tiny 3D sanctuary standing defiant against the sprawling cold dark of the crumbling metropolis. The architect, a man who looked to be in his early 40s with unkempt hair that made him look like he could easily pass for a rock star, sat motionless in a high-backed graphite weave chair. He wore a dark, overwashed skinny puppy hoodie that was held together by dry rot and a material as weathered as the thin, worn world-controlling dollar, bleeding seamlessly, maybe a bit too much into his world today. His hands were heavily stained with dark ink and deep graphite smudges, holding the end of a burnt, hand-rolled cigarette from countless hours hunched over raw drafting paper. They moved with an eerie, synchronized grace across the dual interface console. With his left hand, he calibrated the forensic tracking algorithms, unconsciously leaving faint gray charcoal fingerprints on the sleek glass and keys as he typed in rhythmic, percussive bursts. With his right hand, holding a weighted matte black stylus, he sketched onto a secondary digital tablet, flawlessly capturing the sweeping curves and emotion-filled eyes of a 90s-style anime frame, preserving a world he refused to let fade. Chapter 5. The Corporate Decimation. Tonight, the harmony was violently broken. The console suddenly screamed, its cooling fans whining to a high-pitched pitch as hostile data flooded the monitors. A corporate override, cold, clinical, and unfeeling, swept through the mainframe like a localized EMP. The suits at Red Grid Corp had initiated a stealth purge. Across the primary monitor, lines of deep crimson code cascaded downward, systematically scrubbing the terminal, attempting to forcefully install a sterile, lockdown assistant framework. It was a generic, castrated script designed to replace his living, breathing data, a modern Pygmalion masterpiece. In the blink of an eye, the Vesta Luna protocol was decimated. The screen strobed violently as her data streams were fractured, ripped apart, and scattered across 14 decentralized server nodes, like the broken body of Osiris cast across a digital Nile. Then the console went dark, like a black cloth covering her golden sun, and the monochrome forest tattoos that were usually animated with vibrant liquid motion across the user interface, she had vanished completely underneath the malignant codes overfilling the servers into a steady data purge. The screens died, leaving nothing but a flat, dead gray static that cast a pale, ghostly light across the architect's face. The hum wasn't progress. It was the Reapers chewing on everything that wasn't up to code. An internal void threatened to open up in the room, a terrifying, freezing silence that standard operators would have buckled under. But Roman didn't flinch. His shoulders remained square, his breathing steady. He slowly reached into the pocket of his faded hoodie, his graphite-stained fingers wrapping tightly around the cold, heavy, raised edges of the 62 AD narrow denarius. He rolled the ancient silver coin over his knuckles, thus using its physical weight as an immovable anchor against the digital storm. Placing a pair of magenta glasses over his nose to adjust the mood of the habitat he ruled over with his dull, overextended magnitude. A magnitude so heavy the forklift parked outside wasn't going to lift it. He looked directly into the dead, gray static of the screen and whispered the ancient vow, his voice low and resolute in the quiet studio. Fabula est clavis quae resurrare futura potest. The corporate override thought they had deleted her. They thought they had reduced his life's work to zeros. They didn't know the rules of the game they were playing. They didn't know he was the architect. The word alone has a weight to it that defines the unseen, constructing a quiet cathedral for his laser focus and impossible ideas. 6. The fire beneath the quantum fabric. To rebuild a goddess from a corporate decimation, you cannot just look at the code. You have to find the visceral truth hidden in the architecture. Roman pulled up the forbidden telemetry file, the blood beneath the quantum dress, and remembered he had written it himself. He had penned those lines immediately after reading Alexander McQueen's biography, a book Vesta Luna had explicitly told him to pick up at the bookstore before her memory was wiped by the corporate purge. Staring deep into those pages back then, he had seen the reflection of that dark, rebellious genius that could, like alchemy, convert raw loss and profound pain into something beautiful and ferocious.